Archie 3000, Issue 2. It starts out boring until I finally see a character I recognize, who's on a game show. The pacing's too slow, and if it's gonna be slow, it should at least explain how he got on the game show. He's told he can get a chance to catch up in the anti-gravity chamber, where he and his friends have to catch a half cup of water in a paper cup in 1 minute. Of course, if any of them were actually going to succeed, it would be Betty. So she does. Jughead gets another answer wrong. They are questions that normal people wouldn't get right, but I wish a character that we're supposed to think is stupid was making these wrong guesses. Why would he even sign up for the game show if he wasn't confident for good reason that he would get the questions right because he watched the game show a lot? And he's just getting unlucky. They're told that to catch up in the game show they somehow got on, they have to use remote controls to deactivate 3 robots before they run out of pies to throw at them. They succeed, and while Jughead knows the answer this time, his correct answer isn't counted because he didn't buzz in. A bullshit rule that makes me wonder why game shows even have buzzers. The game host says the tie-breaking question is a sudden death question, and the story ends with Jughead's friends chasing him angrily, giving up their chance to win. I guess the reason they're justified in being mad at him is it was his idea to solely rely on him for the answers, when he should have said to rely on Betty. I assume Dilton is too busy. In the next story, Veronica tells Betty at Pop Taste that she needs to watch her weight and that she should do the same. So Pop Taste somehow worries that he'll lose all of his customers just because Reggie and Archie the town idiots won't show up without them, even though they like other girls most of the time. He didn't need that as an excuse to try diet ice cream. An ice cream salesman shows up with a briefcase right away. It's too bad it's not explained he was beamed here. Eventually he offers to supply everything for free if these girls will be spokesmodels for the product if they have only 1 treat per day. Veronica asks why they can't have as much as they like if it's no calorie. She would have immediately gotten suspicious when he said nervously, "You don't want too much nutrition now, do you?" Somehow, despite hearing a line like that, even though she agreed not to have more than 1 a day, she does so anyways. And there's no indication that Pop Tate kept her from doing so, even though he was there to see the agreement. Some time is wasted with a villain scene when we already figured they could get bad on the stuff. The next week, Veronica notices she gained weight and so does Jughead, and the same thing happened to Betty, because apparently they gain weight too easily considering that they're teenagers who are always skinny. The story also wastes time showing them a commercial advertising that the diet ice cream that somehow has the word tech in its name makes people lose weight. Veronica plans to have her father's lab check out the ice cream. In Seinfeld, Elaine didn't need to have a father who owned a lab to find out that the frozen yogurt still had fat. I've already seen most of this plot in Seinfeld, but I bet this came first. Betty finds out during a massage that the ice cream only helps you lose weight if food intake is eliminated. And why weren't they told this in the first place? Veronica and Betty are shown in sauna clothes at a gym to sweat off their weight, which I've read doesn't really work because you lose water but not fat. The man who gave them the ice cream offer prepares to show them off in front of a camera only to see them wearing fat suits. And he gets punched. The story ends without explaining if Veronica changed her mind about wanting to stop eating ice cream at Pop Tate's. In the next story, Weatherby gets told that the synthesizer he ordered was put in his office because it'd be more secure there. It's so weird to see him in what looks like casual clothes, which are probably supposed to be formal in the future. Later on we see Svensson use it wanting a wheel and end up with meat that's rubbery and full of air because his accent messes up the voice command, even though these things are common ways to produce meals in the future. So this won't happen. Later, Dilton somehow knows that Svensson's messing things up, so reveals he reprogrammed it, causing it to give him windshield wiper. But what is proof that it works for people other than Svensson? It'd be common sense to simply give it other instructions depending on whether it hears Svensson's accent. Weatherby tries eating and ends up popping his food like a rubber tire that flies away unrealistically. He uses the synthesizer, And the story ends with him at least getting the eggs he wanted, but not the rest of it. How did the synthesizer know how to give him a book of jokes? This comic was released before the internet, right? The next story starts with Archie and his friends heading for a store. So far, I can't bring myself to care about what they're saying about it in the first page. They walk over to an arcade game that's a holodeck showing them dinosaurs. Then right after they run away, they see cavemen. And Dilton says to take them to a different era. What are they so scared for when they know it's just a game? It'd be like teenagers being afraid of what they see in a VR game and didn't actually think they're in danger. If anything in there could actually hurt them, the game wouldn't be a part of them all. At first it's just confusing that they keep getting sent to other times because we never see someone press a button. So it looks like the simulation's glitching out. Jughead eats some medieval food. And then they get shown the 50s. So they call the motorcycles strange, and Jughead accidentally tips over all of them. It misses the point of an Archie 3000's plot to show his past time periods instead. Jughead gets threatened by the owners of the bikes, and Dilton was somehow stupid enough to drop the remote control even though he's a genius. But the game ends. The story somehow ends with them all finding out that they were followed to pop tapes by the bad guys in the simulation, even though there wouldn't even be room in the car for them, and they would have been noticed a long time ago. And that's when I've been mentioning how stupid it is that they would come to life anyways. That sucked. The first story was by Harold Smith. The second story was by Dan Parent, and the third and fourth story were also by Harold Smith. Archie 3000, Issue 3. Archie plans to go hover surfing, and Jughead's making a sand space station. Betty's dialogue is stilted. At this point, she'd just say she's getting a tan. She wouldn't say she's getting one under her electronic force field sunscreen. Dilton's using a substance detector to look for plastic, which is rare now, because centuries ago, the world ran out of the fossil fuel needed to make it. He says it wasn't as good as a material now that can heal itself when broken. They've actually invented concrete that can heal itself in real life. So Dilton uses his overpowered device to find something and digs up a frisbee, which Jughead saw a hologram of on screen just so that it can conveniently educate them on how to use it. You'd think the frisbee would be timeless. Moose thanks him when he tells him he made a great catch. Moose finds the gray disc and throws it too, and it turns out the disc was a spaceship belonging to tiny aliens. So when it flies out of his hand, somehow he just says he doesn't know its own strength. How did they instantly forget what color the frisbee was? I guess in this parallel universe, all of them are colorblind. The story wasn't actually that interesting. All that happens is Dilton uses a not metal detector on the beach, and Jughead throws a frisbee. Never seen that before. In the next story, Betty has stilted dialogue again when Veronica already knows she'll be modeling at an animal fashion show. But she's not an animal. She thanks Betty for being her guest for it. And somehow they're driving on the road when the first issue established that even Archie has a flying car. And that his car is outdated. Why would someone as rich as Veronica still drive on the road then? Even though flying cars still have to deal with traffic, it still won't be nearly as much traffic. They get told that the traffic's gotten worse because space debris landed. So it'll take hours to get dealt with. Even though this is a future where anything can get invented, so you'd think they would have just been able to point the ray gun at the space debris to destroy it. But I guess they don't want to destroy it because that'd be a waste. So they want to get rid of it the normal way so they can reuse the materials from it. So you'd think they'd be able to get rid of it a lot faster than hours. Veronica somehow thinks she can get him to move along traffic faster, and he says, well, being as special as you are, I guess I better lift it with my bare hands. It turns out he's being snarky with her because she's dressed like a rich person. I've already seen this kind of plot in Malcolm in the Middle, where Lois wanted traffic to move faster. Somehow Veronica's stupid enough to waste time demanding that the traffic move from her car roof, and everyone around her yells out of their windows to sit down. Naturally, she goes back to her seat with her feelings hurt. It turns out another girl who was heading for the fashion show is right next to them, and she agrees to show her dress, and says it's not as pretty as hers. which more people were that nice. All the other contestants show up too, and Betty turns up the radio and tells them to put on the fashion show in Veronica's car, which is shown on the news. I feel like they're lucky people know it's supposed to be a fashion show. They don't have a runway to walk on. And it's not like the music that plays on the radio is going to be typical of fashion shows, is it? Instead, people get entertained, and somehow someone in the audience says that watching the show on TV is better than seeing it in person. Even though we can only see 2 girls at a time, and Veronica's way too close to the camera. And there has to be a good reason people show up for fashion shows in person. A reporter wonders how Veronica got this idea, and the story ends with her giving Betty the credit with her hand on her shoulder. In the next story, Betty compliments Veronica's dress that she thought up herself and made with a dress synthesizer. And somehow Betty's confused at this, even though a previous story showed that even her high school has a machine that can synthesize anything. There isn't as much point to world building if there's no continuity, but it's still great. She says her synthesizer is all in her helmet in a tiny computer, to be even more creative. Betty says now she remembers, and Veronica used it to summon another outfit. She says that her new dresses express the true Veronica Lodge. So when she sees Archie with another girl, somehow her outfit changes because she's mad, even though she wouldn't have been thinking about that outfit at the time. The girl's his cousin, so you'd think he would have told her about that ahead of time. She eventually talks to a mean girl, and the story expects me to believe this dress of hers looks horrible just to have this humiliate her. Even though it looks better than the previous yellow dress because this one has flames on it. Veronica doesn't let Betty warn her about what's happening to her and just says she's jealous. Betty runs away without warning her, which is out of character since she isn't even abandoning her so that she could get humiliated by Archie seeing her. You'd think Veronica would be able to feel that her clothes changed and are covering more or less of her. I guess she knows they changed, but she just assumes the clothes always look good, which would be common sense. Why would she even think about clothes that don't look good, even subconsciously? Finally, she sees her new outfit in an unlikely mirror. It's a lovely outfit, even if it does make her look evil, but she is a jerk. The story ends with it being discussed that she gave up on the dress device, even though it's obvious that she could prevent this plot by taking the headband off right after he gives her a new dress. This plot just reminds me of that 2000 Sabrina comic where Sabrina's outfit was constantly changing, though it comes before it. In the next story, we see Archie's parents sitting on a long couch in a tube connected to a floating sports arena that looks like an asteroid. They're glad they took the mass transit tubes to Archie's game instead of flying in heavy traffic. They hope their seats will have good video monitors. Why wouldn't they? And sadly, a robot vendor goes down the stairs advertising that he has hot dog tabs and peanut pills somehow, as well as microchips. I say sadly because people wouldn't want those. You'd think there'd be a law against giving a job to a robot that could be done by a human to keep the unemployment rate from skyrocketing. Archie's dad asks what the fun would be of watching sports without individual instant replay. So that's forced too. They say Veronica and Betty jump to the top of a cheerleader's pyramid using anti-gravity belts. I don't think they'd say, disintegrate Centerville. Future or not, that's too dark of a cheer. Archie and his friends are riding floating machines, and Veronica says she'll date whoever scores the winning goal, distracting Archie and Reggie with their competitiveness. It turns out it's a game of air hockey, where a helmet computer can lower a target scope and target something, and a goalie that's inexplicably a robot vaporizes pucks with the light stick, which wouldn't be a thing because then they'd have to get new pucks all the time. Even the referee's a floating robot. He calls for a computer coaching conference, giving Jughead a break to have his machine give him snacks that he was somehow allowed to have in there. It'd take too long for him to finish all that if the conference was brief. And I think the pink ice cream would get on the top of the hole it was sent out of. They get shown a play by a floating robot, even though only football has plays. Moose hits a saucer-shaped puck at Reggie. Not that it's good enough to see, because we don't see the moment it hits his head. Sometimes it's briefly wasted by someone not wanting Riverdale to win the game because the goal was scored by the puck bouncing off Reggie's helmet. And the robot referee says it counts anyways. But somehow, it's not because of the fact that it bounced off the helmet, and not his head. Instead, he says they somehow x-rayed his head to see how hard it is. And I'm just wondering why it's only against the rules to score a goal with your body, and not any other part of you, like the helmet. Either way, the victory wasn't fair. The story ends with Reggie turning down the dates because he has a head injury, as Veronica's holding his arm. And Archie congratulates him with his hand on Betty's shoulder. I would complain about this not being fair, but I hate Reggie. At least in a I love to hate him sort of way. The first story was by Harold Smith. The second story is by Dan Parent. And then there's a story by Kathleen Webb. And the final story is by Harold Smith.